Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I am your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is to help you create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Whether that's in your school community, your classroom, the overall goal is to help you create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Now, if you're new with us, we always start our episodes with a culture tip because this is the Contagious Culture Podcast. And what would this be if we're not guiding you and helping empower not only you in the classroom, but the overall school community and your vision with empowering great contagious culture within your school community? So today's culture tip is be consistently reliable, not ordinarily extraordinary. I think a lot of times we think as people, and this is taking my educator hat off, we think as people that if we do the Big Bang, if we show up once a month and have this amazing program or this amazing event, or even as teachers, if we have an amazing lesson on Monday, then we can skate and be inconsistent Tuesday through Friday. That is not the case. When we focus on contagious culture and really being able to build relationships, create a condition, and create an environment and this, again, ecosystem for us to win in the classroom and with our school community, it's important for us to do things over a consistent period of time well. When you think about any of the greats, whether it's Michelangelo, Pablo Picasso, whether it is anyone, LeBron James to Kobe Bryant, they did the little things over a period of time really well. And over time, they got better and better and better and better. And then they started to see their success skyrocket. When you think of your role as an educator and the overall goal and intention of our students, the goal is not for them to be inconsistent in every single benchmark. They're up and they're down and they're up and they're down. And the information is volatile. The overall goal would be able to show consistent growth over a period of time. And I need you, whether you are a counselor, an educator, a behavioral interventionist, a reading specialist, a leader within your school, a board member, to show up consistently and be that person that other people can count on. Now, when we think about all of the episodes that we've shot, all of the things that we've talked about, it all surrounds around this idea of this ecosystem of contagious culture, this ecosystem of academic excellence. And when we think of this ecosystem, we talk about this every week. It's important for all of us to be on one accord: the teacher, the parent, the student, the leader, the board member, and the community partner. But one thing that we're often missing is the idea of creating conditions within our classrooms that allow students to be able to thrive. Creating conditions within our classroom that allow us to not feel that we're burnt out or crashing as teachers. Now, when I was 14 years old, I had an incident that really woke me up to the importance of behaviors, choices, actions, consistency, and if I'm not being mindful, it could lead to crashing. I was 14 years old, and my parents were getting ready to go to a Maxwell concert in Durham, North Carolina. I asked my father downstairs if I could go to a party that was nearby, and he said, "Well, how are you going to get there, Kyle?" He looked back at me, I looked back at him, and I said, "Well, Dad, I could just borrow the car." Now, mind you, I was 14 years old, and he looked at me like you're probably looking at me right now and said, "Of course not." I run upstairs, asked my mom, before I could even get it out of my mouth, she said, "Kyle, what did your dad say?" And I said, "You know what? I'm just going to let it go." When my parents left, what do you think that I did? Now, comment in the chat. I want you to comment below. Would you have taken the car, or would you have just let it go and missed out on one of the best high school parties of your middle school life? Of course, I took the car. And one of the things that we always recognize is that we can't do things by ourselves. And similar to our students in the classrooms, most times it's not just that one student. They're the catalyst to all of the other behavioral issues that go on in the classroom. They have relationships. They connect with other people that stir them up a little bit so that they can be able to tell the story. So I picked up a friend of mine. We showed up at the party, and it was well worth taking the car. Now, I dropped my friend off after the party, came back home, and it's still to this day, I feel like there was a malfunction in the car because I thought I hit the brake and I was in the wrong gear and I hit the gas and ran straight through the closed garage door. Now, at this time, I had a decision to make. Was I going to continue this lie, or was I going to own my mistake and actually make things right? Well, being a 14-year-old man, I didn't understand the importance of integrity. I didn't understand the importance of anything at that time. And I still had a lot of life ahead of me. So I called my mom and I said, Mom, somebody stole the car and ran it back into the house. So my mom, South Jersey project, she's been around the block a time or two. She said, Kyle, so you mean to tell me that somebody stole the car with the keys, took it out of the driveway, ran it back into the house, left the car there with the keys, with the door open, and you didn't hear any of this? And I said, yes. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand, that it's not about me crashing the car. It's not about my parents getting mad and putting me on probation and grounding me literally for eternity after this. It's not about any of the decisions that led up to this. It's one thing that makes this story relevant to all of what we're going to talk about today. I think a lot of times in classes, there's not a condition, there's not a reason, there's not a foundation that we've really been able to set within our classrooms for our students that leave us as educators crashing, feeling burnt out, running into things, making the wrong decisions, not understanding how to really address specific student behavior within the classroom. So today I'm going to give you 4 steps. I promise, just 4 steps that are going to help you create conditions in your classroom, make better choices and decisions as an educator, be able to partner with your students so that you can be able to feel supported and be able to develop contagious culture in your classroom as well as in your school community. Now, before we get started, this episode is sponsored by the Writers Game. This episode is sponsored by the Writers Game, the choice, the educator's choice for publishing company where we help you unpack, write, edit, publish, and market that story that is inside of you. Now, when we think about the 4 steps, when we think about these 4 steps to creating this condition in the classroom, we're going to use an acronym called GEAR. The G stands for it has to be grounded in values. When we think of anything that we're doing, it starts with that vision of excellence that we talked about on the last episode. But in anything that we do, we have to understand, and what Simon Sinek calls start with why, we have to understand the purpose in which why we're doing something. It has to be grounded in values. Now, when you think of these values, and what we're going to talk about a little bit later in this episode, I want you to be able to talk about these things personally with yourself before you share them with your students. What type of educator do you want to be? What type of classroom environment do you want to have? What types of things are important to you personally as an individual, as an adult? Whether it's integrity, whether it's honesty, whether it's open communication, whether you want to be able to create a safe space, whether it's work ethic, whether it's a faith base, whatever those things are, you need to be able to write those things down on a sheet of paper on the top 3 to 5 values that you have personally. Now, once you understand those values, I think it's more important to be able to document them and then communicate them openly with other students in your classroom. Like, hey guys, I know this is day 1. My name is Kyle King. I'm going to be your ELA instructor today. And I have one rule, and that one rule is values. My values individually are honesty, family, my faith, and open communication in everything that we do. Let's just say I just made those things up. Now, the first activity that we're going to have as a class is I want you to write down your values. Now, the values are things that are important to you, things that are non-negotiable, things that you know you want your friends to be, whether it's honest, whether it's integral, whether it's showing up on time, whatever those things are. So I want you to write 3 things down that are most important to you. So what this allows you to do as an educator is you're able to share a piece of you with your class, but then you're also able to hold them accountable to writing down the values within their specific lives so that we can be on the same page. Now, once you get through your lesson, because this is just a warm-up activity, what you're going to do as an educator, and the exit ticket is you're going to take all these values up. You're going to review them that night. You're going to assess and analyze them, whether you're using AI tools or just being able to assess them in an Excel spreadsheet. And you're going to choose the 7 most common values in the class. You're going to type them up, and then the next day that they come there, you're going to be able to present it to all the students. Hey guys, I want to thank you all for being a part of our value analysis yesterday. Yesterday, we had a warm-up where we wrote down our values. I shared my values to you. And what I did last night is I read through every single person's values. Now, I want you to know that I took into account all of the values that we had, and I wanted to put them in 7 words that will guide all of what we do in this classroom. In this classroom, I want you to feel supported. I want you to feel heard. And what we're going to do together is we're going to repeat these values out loud. In today's activity for our warm-up, you're going to define what this means to you. You're going to define what it means to you and what type of activities we need to be able to create in the classroom so that we can be able to create this type of environment and that energy in the classroom so it makes y'all actually want to be in here. Because look, I'm going to be honest. If y'all don't want to be in here, y'all are going to act a fool. Y'all aren't going to pay attention. Y'all aren't going to be locked in. And then that's going to make me not want to be here. And then that's not going to help you academically or socially in life. All right. So what we're going to do right now, I want you to define what this word means to you. So then what this allows us to do, the next day we take it up. And then the next morning, you've now written down specific pillars and activities or specific action steps attached to those values. And now we're going to be able to present it to the class. So over this week process, this first week, you're setting that foundation. And if it's after spring break or after winter break or after summer break or after fall break, whatever it needs to be, it's never too late to reestablish and set the conditions in your classroom. Okay? So now what we're able to do is now we're able to have words, we're able to have behaviors attached to it. And then the third step would be able to create consequences if we're not meeting the specific standard that we've set in the classroom. So when we think about the G of this gear model, it's grounded in values. Now, let's move to the E. When we think about this E, it's important for us to first ground values because the E is always establishing a standard. One of the most prolific coaches that I've ever seen is old school Buffalo Bills when they were 1-11, and a coach came in there and turned that program around within 2 years. And the one thing that he always said is the standard is the standard. And it was up all through all of the Buffalo Bills locker rooms and all over the place. And what the reality was of that coach is one thing. The standard is the standard, and what that meant is showing up to practice on time, getting dressed for game day in regards to being in a shirt and tie, being positive and collaborating with your teammates, operating with a sense of excellence in everything that we do, going 100% during drills and in practice. And if at any point, people in that time went against that specific standard, they were removed from the team or they were removed from the coaching staff. Now, we don't live in a world where as educators, we can just remove students. And that is not, as an educational leader, as an administrator, as a director over a charter school, that is literally the last resort that I ever recommend to educators. But one thing that I do understand is the importance of establishing standards in the classroom so high that it forces your students to be able to meet them. At a failing middle school, and I just want to emphasize this, at a failing middle school that I taught at ELA, I taught ELA at a failing middle school where students were 11% and 12% proficient in math as well as in ELA. I came in with a standard so high and believed so much in those students that it bled within them, and they knew 3 to 4 months into my teaching and into this classroom environment that they could do it, and that there was a no-nonsense type of classroom environment, that I can still love you and hold you to a standard. I can still expect more from you and hold you to a standard. I can still push you past your own limitations and still hold you to a standard. So if we're grounded in values and we've been able to share those values as a class and we've attached consequence and we have a standard, that means that when we come into this class, it is disrespectful if you don't show up on time. It is disrespectful if you're talking when I am talking. It is disrespectful if you didn't turn in your work. It is disrespectful if we're underperforming. This is the type of environment that we have the opportunity when we start with heart and when we lead with heart and when we build consistent and quality and genuine relationships with our students. This is the type of environment that we can build in our classroom environments. It starts with grounding ourselves in values, establishing a standard. And once we've established a standard, the A of the GEAR model is actions set the tone. What you do after you have some values and after you have some standards is literally the most important part. I think a lot of teachers start off super strong. They start off with classroom rules and expectations and homework policies and all of these different things and consequences. But then throughout the year, they may start getting burnt out. They may start not preparing as much. They may stop lesson planning as much. They may get a little tired. They may start thinking about how much they make or how little they make within their educational careers. They may start thinking about other opportunities. And what happens is that our actions fade. We start getting lazy. We start thinking about all of the other things outside of that purpose and grounding ourselves in those values. It's an adage that talks about children don't remember and don't do what you tell them. They do what you show them. So it's important for you as an educator to model the expectations that you wish your students to meet. It's important as an educator to show up on time. It's important as an educator to be prepared. It's important as an educator to have all of your resources ready to roll. It's important as an educator to be respectful to your students. It's important as an educator to have crucial conversations when somebody isn't meeting those standards. It's important as an educator to share the data and be able to meet your students where they are, to be able to grow them through the process of where the best that they can do. The actions and what you do set the tone. I always say that activity does not equal achievement. Just because you have a lot of worksheets and just because you work late that night doesn't mean you actually well prepared or are well prepared for that specific lesson. Just because you did a lot that week doesn't mean that's going to result in your students actually performing at a high level. So when you think about your actions over the past week, when you think about your actions over the past month, do those actions best align with the goals that you wish for your students? Do those actions best align for the goals that your students want in their lives? Do your actions best align with the purpose that you had when you became an educator? And I think it takes a lot of self-reflection sometimes for us to really ask ourselves those tough questions. So again, when we're grounded in values and when we establish a standard and when our actions set the tone, it allows us, with the R of this GEAR model, for us to be able to create relationships that drive results in the classroom. Relationships, I believe, are the breadcrumbs to our destiny. And before we introduce content, curriculum, worksheets, resources, we have to love our students. And I understand we have students that are harder to love than others. But if we're leading with our heart and starting with our heart, and if we're seeing students past their worst decision, if we're seeing students past what they wore that day, if we're seeing students past how underprepared they are, if we're seeing students past what we see on their test scores or their behavioral reports, if we're seeing students past what we see on the outside, and we give ourselves the opportunity to look inside, that allows us to really shift the gear in our classrooms and create a condition for our students that allows them to thrive. One of the questions that our subscribers asked this week is, Kyle, what is the best way to establish classroom rules within the classroom? Now, as amazing of a question that is, I think it again starts with grounding values, establishing a standard, actions and modeling the expectations that you have with your students, and then being committed to building relationships with these children, I'm going to give you 4 steps to be able to answer this question in the best of my ability. 1, I begin with a shared vision. You have to have some form of a shared vision that kids care about within your classroom. And at the beginning of class, you can ask that, or at the beginning of a semester, you can ask these specific questions. What do we want to be able to achieve as a class together? Hey guys, this is the data. This is where we're performing as a class. What do we want to be able to be? Do we want to grow by 10%? Do we want to grow by 30%? Do we want to grow by 100%? What do we want to be able to do? Now, in order for us to be able to do that, you have to be able to show them what responsibilities look like so that they create what we call as classroom ownership. You hold them accountable to the goals that they wish to be able to seek as a specific student within your classroom. So you have a shared vision. Create that vision statement together, have them write it down, and then plaster it all over your wall as well. Once we establish that shared vision, it's important for us to document it and show them in the classroom. So every single day that they come to your classroom, they see that vision statement and they have an immediate reminder of what they need to be able to do in the classroom. Now, what I used to do as a teacher, if somebody's on task, I say, John, what am I pointing at? What's our vision of excellence in this classroom? Does your behavior align with this vision that we created together? Does your behavior align with you becoming that doctor in 10 years? Does your behavior align with you going to college? Let me ask you something. You wanted to be a college athlete, right? If you were doing this in the middle of a film session, how would your coach respond? Would you still be able to start on that team? Well, I need you to clean it up now, and I want you to act in the way that you would want to be in the future. See, if we're able to attach our students' behavior and actions and choices in the classroom with where they want to be because we've been focused on that relationship and starting with and leading with heart, then it allows our students to redirect because they know that we care, they know that we see them, they know that we actually know them enough to be able to challenge them and push them, hold them to a standard, but still love them in the same way. Step number 3 is to model. Again, modeling is the number 1 step as an educator. You have to be able to show these standards. You have to pace around the room. You have to touch every student. You have to see them, value them, and share these moments with your students. You have to care. You come prepared, they'll be prepared. You come ready, high energy, they'll come ready in high energy. You show them respect, they'll show you respect. You love them, they'll love you. All of these different things. And again, I'm not going to say it's always going to be easy because it's not. There's going to be moments that are challenging, but if you stay grounded in those values and you remember that why, when things get challenging, you'll have something to fall back on. And then the last step is to be able to attach it and create group consequences. Now, I know this is controversial in a lot of spaces within education, but again, this is one thing that worked for me. If we have shared vision, shared values, and established a standard as a class, then if one person misses the mark, we all miss the mark. It's one band, one sound mentality as a teacher when I taught. If one kid is off task and is disrupting the lesson, then we sometimes may have to pause the lesson, or what you're able to do is you're able to have group accountability. So if I see that we're trying to reach a data mark and we're trying to grow as a class, and I see that, then now what you're going to start creating within your classroom is other students stepping in and say, hey, David, we gotta lock in right now. Zayasia, I need you to calm down because Mr. King is teaching. Now, immediately you may not be able to have that because you hadn't built that relationship with those students. But I can guarantee if you stay consistent, if you stay committed, and if you remember to ground yourself in values, to establish a standard, that actions set the tone, and you're focused on creating relationships, quality and genuine relationships with your students past what you see on the outside while focusing on what you see in the inside, you will create a classroom environment in a condition that is immeasurable, a condition that is focused on contagious culture, a condition that allows your students to see themselves and feel seen, feel heard, feel valued and respected. They feel a part of something. And then that will allow them to ultimately feel empowered. One of the things that I want you to remember is that you are valuable, that your values matter, your standards of performance and your expectations in your classroom matter, that you may have crashed as an educator before, you may feel burnt out even right now watching this video, but you are the spark. You are the light. And sometimes it requires you to be able to shine on the darkness that we sometimes see in these classrooms and in our school buildings. Our students need you. There's a child right now that needs to come to school every day just to see you, just to hear from you, just to get that hug or that encouragement from you. And if we're creating contagious culture in these spaces, whatever it looks like, it's going to require a commitment from you, a commitment to be a part of spreading this idea of contagious culture, a commitment to be a part of empowering students past their own limitations, and a commitment to drive this car in the right gear towards academic excellence through creating an ecosystem for your students. I want you to like, comment, and subscribe to this episode, and we'll see you next time on the Contagious Culture Podcast.